the reason you're on the show is because of the things I respect about what you're doing. Just let's begin with that. That's important. But I wondered.
It's true that women initiate 80% of divorces. That's true. That's a stat. That's true. However, you can see why throughout history, religion has been dominant in enforcing those things because it is a good for society. But in the reality that we live in, I have a different viewpoint.
We need men to get married before they're ready and to have kids before they can afford it.
Those guys are boys in their 20s. They don't need to be getting married right now. The reason why I do harder things is because I'm a man. I'm the man.
I refuse to stay in a victim mentality. I gotta stand and fight for my honor and my family. That's how I did it, cause that's how it had to be. So now I'm slaying dragons and I do it happily. I told him I refuse to be another casualty. I looked inside the dragon's eyes and then I told him casually, hi, I'm a dragon slayer and I got a dragon lair. I'ma go and slay a dragon, then I'm gonna drag him there. I don't care, I ain't scared. Look inside my heart and there's a lion there. Conquering my dragons, I ain't fighting fair.
John Sonmez is the founder of Bulldog Mindset, where he focuses on teaching others how to develop a relentless approach to personal development and financial independence. Through his podcast, John shares insights on how to cultivate mental toughness, build a strong mindset, and achieve success in all areas of life. With a background in software development and a passion for self-improvement, he inspires listeners to break through their limitations and transform their lives. John is the author of a best-selling book on the intersection of software development and mindset growth, recognized for its influential perspective on career advancement.
John, it's great to be with you. I appreciate the invitation. In fact, one of my team members worked with another very famous YouTuber, and I think you were a guest or their connection was made there, and he said, Dave, you need to have John on the show because a lot of the things that you say remind me of some of the things that he said. So I thought it'd be good just to kind of introduce our audience to you through your own words. I mean, we heard your introduction before,
sure,
but just in your own words, what brought you from where you were in life to being together with me today on the program?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a journey. I started off as a very different person than I am now. Really the theme of my life is transformation. And, I was a software developer. I was kind of this nerdy guy, very socially awkward, wasn't good with women, didn't, was lazy, all these things, wasn't physically fit at all. And, what ended up happening was at some point in my life, I kind of had this experience where I realized that I wasn't going to live the life that I wanted to live unless I actually started taking these actions. And I went through this massive transformation. A lot of this was led by reading a lot of books. Amazingly, it's like completely changed my views and my mindset. And I went down this road of developing myself. And it eventually took me down the road of masculinity and trying to figure out what the heck is that? Like, no one really seemed to know. And so I read a lot of books on that and I studied that.
By the way, in a world today when people don't know what a man or a woman is,
exactly,
it's hard to find the answer. Yeah.
And so, all this really came down to a couple things, to kind of summarize it, which is getting rid of the victim mindset. And that's where I got this idea of adopting what I call the Bulldog mindset, the opposite of the victim mindset, taking personal responsibility and accountability for yourself. A lot of that was influenced by Stoic philosophy as I read through the Stoics and realized, wow, this is not just a philosophy, this is the truth of life. And then a lot of this led me down the path of kind of where I'm at now, which is really focusing on relationships. I started to realize that perhaps the most important thing for a man to do is to understand how to be masculine in a relationship with the woman, because that influences so much of not only his life and her life, but children's life and society in general. So the Bulldog mindset really is something that I created to help men to become the kind of men that they want to be and to really transform their lives. And that's kind of the journey that I went through myself, and I'm still going on, but I want to help other men, to reach what they didn't think that was possible.
Did you know that Leading Giants has over 120 micro-learning modules from 4 to 19 minutes on entrepreneurship, communication, anything to maximize your influence? We are here to help you build the life of your dreams by maximizing your influence, growing a company, leading people at levels you've never led before. If you're in sales, having a greater opportunity for increased closing percentages and larger activity than you've ever had before. It's time now for you to jump in and join Leading Giants. All you have to do is press that button right down there. In order to access this, share with your friends, become a giant. We'll go slay some dragons.
See, I love that. But so this journey, and this is one of the things, because I don't mind telling you, and I'll start with this. The reason you're on the show is because of the things I respect about what you're doing. Just let's begin with that. That's important. But I wondered, I've seen an evolution in you. So I'll just, how old are you, John?
I'm 43.
43. Okay, so I'm 54. I've got 6 kids, 7 grandkids.
Oh, wow.
My kids are all adults and married or on the way to be married. My oldest son is actually going to be ordained a priest in May. So the evolution was this. Especially when I saw you got married.
Yeah.
I go back to some of your early recordings. And by the way, if you disagree with these things and we have some, debate, it comes honestly. So one of the things I was complimenting John before the show is I usually put out a couple of questions. Hey, do you want to go through these questions or not? And his answer is basically, ask me anything. I'm not afraid of it. A true sign of a man, by the way. I used to do this thing with young guys called Whiskey, Wit, and Wisdom, where we would get together and we would just hang out on Wednesday nights. The full title was Whiskey, Wit, and Wisdom, no wine, no whining, and no women.
Nice.
And the rules were you could talk about anything you wanted, sports, politics, religion, anything. But as a man, you can't be offended.
Yeah.
And you can be as emotional as you want, as long as your intellect leads your emotions.
Right.
And so kind of under that banner. But anyway, there was a video that you did that was quite popular and I'm just going to go out with this is why I said, I don't know if I want the guy on the show. It was basically advice that you were giving a guy who was wondering about a girl, if she's a virgin or not. And you more or less said, this isn't going to go well, but it's going to be just practice. And then I wonder if you did that video today, if you would do it differently. As a father, the idea of practicing a man practicing sex on my daughter would be highly offensive. Like I'd kick his ass.
Right. Yeah.
And yet I watched your evolution and I saw this kind of honest. Like I saw you trying to be kind to this guy, and I saw that you were moving in this particular place. And your attitude, even about being that protector as a man for your wife, seemed to evolve a little bit. I don't know. Do you want to comment on that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've definitely gone through, like, some things have changed and some things have stayed the same, right? Because there's principles. And kind of, I think a good way to think about this is that, principles are like models, right? It's like, we don't know. We can't describe the exact principle, but we try to find an approximation of it. And I think as we grow, we get a deeper understanding of what is that really underlying, or what are the hierarchy of principles, like which principles, what does this really, really mean? And so that's kind of how I view a lot of things, is that as I'm growing and learning, maybe I'm getting a deeper understanding of a certain principle. Now, like for the virgin thing, I think one thing that I think is really important is that, because a lot of people will say, John, you kind of teach guys game and pickup, how to pick up women, but then you're talking about, that women should not sleep with a man on the first date, and the sanctity of marriage and all these things like this. These seem to be in conflict. And what I think about is that as a man and a woman, I think there are two conflicting forces, honestly, right? A man is trying to get sex. A woman is trying to get commitment. And these things are in opposition to each other. But they're not necessarily a bad thing. They're a dance. It's a delicate dance that goes back and forth that we play. And I think as a man, men need to learn how to go out there, how to go and talk to women, how to be successful with women, how to try to move their agenda forward. That's what they should be seeking. But women, at the same time, need to learn how to preserve their value, how to push back on those things, how to get a man to invest and make some kind of commitment before giving him what he wants. And I think that the problem is that if we just go one way or the other, which I think society is tending to go the way of men and saying, just be promiscuous, just do whatever you want. And that's not good, obviously. But if we go the other way of women, and if men just are like, no, I'm just going to, be committed to a woman and just give her this commitment right away, then women aren't really attracted to that either. And so I think, like, for example, in that case of the virgin guy and his first experience, I think the point I was really trying to communicate back then was that, like, don't put so much pressure on yourself. Like, this is probably not going to be a great experience, because every guy has to have their first time. And so don't worry so much about that. Now, you say, would you like a guy experimenting on your daughter? Obviously not. Obviously I wouldn't.
Yeah.
either.
Well, yeah, right.
But
yeah,
I
know.
Okay.
Do you have kids?
Yeah, I have a daughter. Yeah, she's 12. Yeah.
Okay, so you have a daughter. So you kind of get that point. So I think, see, this is kind of the evolution of this sort of thing, I think. So I've said to a long time, hey, listen, if you're like this ultra feminist, you must know that what you think you're producing in the world to gain power is going to backfire.
Right. Exactly.
Now, this is probably the most controversial thing that I'm going to say. It's also true, but people aren't going to like it. The only reason that women have power in the world is because men give it to them.
That's true. Yeah, it's absolutely true.
If you look at every society that exists out there that currently still has not given women rights, they don't have those rights. Mm-hmm. And they don't get the rights because they overthrow men. They get the rights because good men, because give them power.
Right.
I mean, this is the thing. When they don't have rights, it's because bad men are suppressing them in a particular way. So I'm not advocating that at all. Right. But to be ignorant of the idea that the reason they have their power is because they find advocacy in good men who have said, no, listen, you should be able to vote and drive and be educated and all these things that make sense. Well, what happens, though, is the reason they were rebelling and seeking out these good men to fight for them was because they were suppressed.
Right.
And now what the feminist movement is doing is suppressing men.
Yes.
Which is a very bad idea.
Exactly.
Because men eventually can take that power back.
Right.
And when they do, they're going to be abusive to women, which I think is a really problematic thing.
Exactly.
So I understand this kind of like backlash that men have to say, let me pursue my objective and my goals. But I think the dance that you said is one where you can have both. Let me pause there and go to one of the questions that you wanted me to go through, because I like this question.
Oh, sure. Okay.
What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a man?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I've described this in a variety of different ways every time I answer this question. I've written a whole essay on this thing, but I'll give it to you just off the top of my head right now, because like I said, I think that you can talk about it in different ways. But I think primarily it means to be responsible for yourself, but not just yourself, but to be able to take care of others, because it's the minimum bar of a man to not be a negative on society, right? But a true man needs to not be able to just take care of himself, but be able to take care of other people, to be a net positive, right? That's why I advocate for men paying for dates and taking care of women and doing those things, because
which is strangely offensive to a certain population. I don't know.
It amazes me that it's the same. It just drives me nuts, because I have a podcast with my wife called Better Than Perfect, and we talk about traditional relationships on there. And there would be so many angry guys commenting on it that are like, she should pay for her own stuff. I'm not going to pay for. And I'm like, these are the exact same guys that are upset about feminism. And I'm like, guys, you can't have it both ways. Like, if you want women to be feminine and you want to be masculine, you want to be the authority in your house and be the man, you got to pay for everything. That's how it is. Like, you got to take care of everybody if you want that authority. But it's the same guys, and it just drives me nuts, because I'm like, you guys.
Because what happens is they're so confused.
Yeah,
they were taught they're not supposed to have the authority.
Right.
So they want that authority, but somehow they feel guilty about that authority. And then they feel conflicted because they're doing these particular things. That's interesting. I mean, that whole idea of accepting responsibility, I think, is a huge one.
Yeah.
So I don't mind telling you that my formation in this comes from my Catholic worldview. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I always find it funny when people are on shows and they say, hey, you've been successful, John, or you've been successful, whoever.
Right.
Tell us what the key to your success is. And they are talking about a lot of different things. And then one of them happens to be, by the way, my faith. And the person's like, no, I don't want the actual answer. I mean, that might be what it was for you. I don't want the actual answer. I want the fake one that's going to be like placating my audience.
Right.
So like for me, if you said what drives me is my atheism, and I doubt that you're an atheist, I don't know. That's not my point.
Right.
Or if you said it's that I'm a Stoic, or I am a Catholic or a Buddhist, I would be interested in that answer, because that's your answer.
Right.
So that's why I'm telling you what mine is, because otherwise people try to guess, and it makes it a little easier. So my worldview on this is that really what it takes to be a man are these things that you said, which, by the way, are super important. But also the ability to sacrifice, and you've actually said this, not the same words, to sacrifice for a woman.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you're doing that sacrifice, I think it comes in a whole way, which brings back together that earlier conversation. Truly a man is a guy who says, I'm attracted to this woman, and I do want something naturally here, from a physical perspective. But even though I want that, I see you as a whole person, not an object, but as a subject. Therefore, you want something too, which is a commitment. And ultimately, both want that, because also women do want sex, men want sex.
Exactly.
Men want a commitment, women want a commitment, but it comes maybe a different order for a guy. So the guy has to work against his natural self to say, because I respect you, I'm willing to suffer for you in the beginning of the relationship. It may not work out, but in the beginning of the relationship, I'm going to resist a desire that I have. And then ultimately for me, I believe that commitment comes after marriage. But I also realize how unbelievably unpopular that is in today's society. But that prevents an enormous amount of pain that people bring into a marriage when the woman has to think about, how many other women was this guy with? Like, at some point, she's going to think about that, and it will not make her feel good. And the guy will think that, which is one of the reasons that men are not attracted to women who have a lot of access to men. And women don't realize, if you're texting your old boyfriend, this guy's going to shut you out and maybe use you and then shut you out. Anyway, comments on that, John?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things to unpack there. So what's interesting about me, I think, is that I'm not an atheist. I'm agnostic, more so. However, I don't drink. I don't smoke. I believe in the sanctity of marriage and the masculine and the feminine. And the man should be the leader and authority in his house and all these things. So I kind of present a unique viewpoint, because I believe not only are these things biblical, but they're logical. They make sense, right? They're the way that the universe was created and ordered. And I do believe that there is a creation and an order of the universe. I don't think it's random chance. So
let me just when you say you're an agnostic, for the sake of the audience, because a lot of times people are confused between the two different terms, you would say there could be a God, you just can't know it.
I would. In fact, I would say that there's no such thing as an atheist, because if someone proclaims to be an atheist, then they're not living the atheist lifestyle, which is to do whatever you want to do and not worry about any moral consequences. Anytime you can cheat or steal or get away with something, there's no reason why you shouldn't do it if you're an atheist. So no one's really an atheist. Maybe there's a few people, but most people who claim to be atheists are not atheists.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing, because that would mean that you believe there is a higher power that you're accountable to.
I'd say that my beliefs fall more closer to the Buddhist.
By the way, I didn't expect to get into religion, but hey, we're here.
I think I grew up Christian, actually. I taught men's Bibles. I'm pretty familiar with the Bible, with the Book of Mormon, with the Quran, and with all the major religions. I mean, I've tried to read the Vedas, but that's a long undertaking. But I'd say I'm more aligned with Buddhist kind of philosophies, in the idea that, which sort of intersects Christianity, if you really, really think about it, because God is, omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, right? So if he's everywhere, then he must be everything, and everything must be sourced from God. And so my kind of, again, not to profess that I have it all figured out, but the way that I intersect those thoughts is the idea that we are all in some way a part of God.
So the interesting is, on the Christian thought, God is ever present, but he is not everything. God is not a tree. He's not the camera I'm staring into. And he is not you or me. However, we can have him in us. Yes, and that is a part of it, to have his grace in us, and ultimately, and this catches a lot of people off guard, even in their Christian faith, to when we're in heaven, to be in essence deified by him, because we are absorbed by his perfection in that regard. And these things are not small, because they do, like what you're saying is, hey, kind of the philosophies that I have are according to the belief that I have, and they dictate the behavior that way. And so it's just an interesting thing when you look at that. Now, are you still like into the Stoic idea? Does that move you a lot?
Yeah. I believe it's not just a philosophy. It is just a fundamental. It's more of a principle, right? A lot of these principles of life, right? Because this idea that we should be non-attached to the external, and that we should focus on the internal, and that we shouldn't be subject to fortune or fate, right? So that we insulate ourselves from that. I think that's the only thing that really makes sense, especially as a man in the masculine, avoiding being led by our emotions. We have emotions. I think a lot of people misunderstand stoicism, and they think it means no emotions or indifference to, because they quote the indifference to pain or pleasure, but they don't understand what indifference means. It means that the pain or pleasure is not going to influence your actions. You might still feel those things, but as a man, I think it's very important to have logic and your analysis dictate your actions, not to be led by your emotions. Not that you don't have emotions, and not that those emotions don't influence you in some way. And so I think that's really the core of Stoic philosophy, is that, and then dealing with your mortality.
Giants, we need your help with something. The world desperately needs more giants like you. Head over to Apple Podcasts and give this podcast a 5-star rating so we can build an army of giants and go slay dragons together.
Yeah, I think two things to that. One is that where Stoicism for me only falls short, because I admire all those things you just mentioned about it, is that there is a certain amount of lack of passion. And I know you said that there's a misreading of that. I get the misreading. I understand when people are like, a Stoic is not a robotic person.
Right.
But at the same time, the amount of detachment that they have does prevent them from the ultimate form of love, because there has to be a little bit of a distance there. When you study Stoicism and you do it in contrast to like Christianity, there's a form of love that stops at a certain point. But men need that now. Men need that idea that, listen, you got to stand up. You have to be willing to do these sacrifices, do things the right way. So, okay, you just said something very fascinating to me.
Okay.
You said then ultimately at the end of the day, they have to deal with their mortality.
Right.
So you're familiar with Viktor Frankl?
Yes. Yeah. Man's Search.
Okay, so Man's Search for Meaning. So he, when he writes a book, and he goes through the suffering they did in Auschwitz. He when he developed logotherapy, okay, in essence, what he discovers is a lot of different things, and not to mention the fact that when you have this tiny little couple 100-calorie diet in a day,
right,
and somebody else is on it, but you look at them and they say, you need mine, and you give it to them, and you give that to them. Quite often, the person who gave it away is the one who remained more healthy.
Right. Right.
Because they had this particular need to understand suffering. But ultimately speaking, one of the things that in developing logotherapy, which is going back to those days in Auschwitz and say, hey, in this most intense situation, some people actually survived. And how did they do that? And other people survived, when they got home, they couldn't handle anything. What was it? What were the healthy people doing? And of course, he lost his family. And so how can this guy go through this? Well, in the logotherapy, he talks about the existential aspect of this, that they never stopped asking themselves or hoping for the future. Right. What will it be like when I'm at home? And thinking about that. And then you tie that to Aristotelian thought. And Aristotle talked about like these 4 levels of happiness that modern day philosophers talk about as well too, and Thomas Aquinas and Spitzer and all these people. Basically, you have the physical realm. Okay, and I want to get to you on this. I'm just setting this up because you've gone through this transformation. I've watched you do a lot of these things and going back and watching some of your videos. And there's an admiration that I have for this self-agency. So when we want to be happy, we do physical things. We eat, drink, we smoke. Makes you feel good right away. But generally speaking, whenever you do that out of order, and sex is a part of that too,
sure,
now it leads you to dissatisfaction and sadness, which is why these people get together and they're together for 2 weeks, 3 months, 4 months. They break up and there's heartbreak everywhere and misery, and they carry that into the next relationship. Yeah. Or if they eat too much, you know what happens, drink too much and that. So then they go to the next level. They're like, I'm going to accomplish. Okay, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to build a business. I'm going to make money. I'm going to win a gold medal. And they're happier for a longer period of time, but that leads to dissatisfaction because they can't eat enough, drink enough, smoke enough, have sex enough, earn enough, build enough, accomplish enough before they realize I'm missing something.
Right.
So then they usually go philanthropic. And they say, well, I'm going to give. And they do, and they feel better for longer. But they can't eat enough, drink enough, have sex enough, build enough, accomplish enough, win enough, give enough to have that. They move ultimately existential. And they say, how did I get here and where am I going?
Right.
And that ultimately is the question. What are your thoughts when you say this about mortality?
Okay, let me go back real quick to the Stoic real quick, because I think it's important to point out that I would say that that it is actually a greater love that you can have when you have a detachment. And the reason why is because it expects nothing in return. And so the purest form of love is, Jesus would say that, there's no greater love than this, that a man lays down his life for his friends, right? And that is a purest form of love because it requires, there's nothing you can gain by it. And part of the Stoic form of love, which I think a lot of people miss, is this pure love where you do not expect anything in return, and you just give from yourself. And I think that is the reason why it requires a non-attachment. And it's because when you truly love with non-attachment, you have no expectation of return because there's nothing you're holding on to. So I think there is, a piece of that does get missed by many scholars that study Stoic philosophy.
I'm aligned with your idea of what love is in that regard, that it doesn't give back. But I do think it stands a little bit in contrast with the male agenda.
Yeah, I think there is some.
The way you worded it earlier, I think there's a contradiction that needs to be reconciled in that.
Yeah. I think that there is. One thing that I've always said is that man's greatest gift is love, right? That is if you try to define masculinity and you say what it is the example of Jesus, right? It is the self-sacrifice. But I also do think that, kind of speaking to what we were just, this is a good segue to exactly what we were just talking about, those hierarchies, is that. In order, what I found in coaching men is that in order for men to open up to those higher motives, right, which is, it's kind of the same thing that you described, but I described it in a little bit different way when I kind of discovered this, which is that they must meet their base motives first. Because, one thing that I was often criticized about is like, again, along the lines of teaching guys pick up and game and things like that, and how to make money and get in shape. When I know that those aren't the important things in life, is that why teach these guys these things? And the answer is because, look, if you are a 30-year-old virgin and you've never even kissed a girl, and I tell you, look, man, here's the thing. It doesn't really matter. Like, that stuff isn't important. You don't really need to make a lot of money and everything like that. There's something well beyond this. Like, all those things are not going to, girls and cars and money and all this stuff, it's not going to make you happy. The guy, he's not listening to me. He's not going to listen until he gets to experience at least some of that himself, and then realize for himself, no, that's not actually going to make me happy. And so I think kind of going into that, as far as the preparing for death, from a Stoic viewpoint, and I think just from a life viewpoint, is this idea that, we fear death, we fear the end, and it's because we have not lived. And the more that we understand life, and the more that we let go of the desires that we have and the avoidance that we have, again, this kind of corresponds to a lot of Buddhist philosophy as well. The more that we realize that everything that we have is already within us now, everything that we need. And so we don't need all these things. We have the ability to experience joy and fulfillment from within us, but we think we need these things. But no one can really convince us of those things until we've gone through some of that experience in life and have actually done the work, the inner work, maybe studying philosophy and developing ourselves to realize that none of these things will ever make us happy. They can only temporarily make us happy, but the real joy that we can have in fulfillment in life is not something that you actually have to chase. It's something that you already have.
So this is interesting. We're way more aligned than we aren't on these things. I think ultimately speaking, it is my Catholic faith and your more agnostic position that is the differentiator.
I think so.
So yes, when you say to somebody who it's so disingenuous. If when you build wealth and you have it, and you look at somebody that doesn't have it, and you say money doesn't buy happiness, they're like, well, let me try that experiment myself. Okay, you can tell me that, but I'm going to try that experiment.
Right.
The same thing even with women to a young man. But I think the difference there is then the responsibility is to explain to them why.
Right.
See, I think the biggest mistake that a lot of parents make is they say, well, I was promiscuous and I smoked pot and I slept in, so who am I to tell my kid not to do it?
Right.
Well, you're their parent.
Right. Exactly.
That's who. That's like if you're a surgeon or a heart surgeon and you're like, well, I smoke. Who am I to tell my heart patients not to smoke? Well, you're their heart surgeon.
Right.
And people hate to be called a hypocrite. But the problem is that's not hypocrisy. What that is weakness. If you're a doctor that smokes, a hypocrite is a person who doesn't even believe what they're saying to you.
Yes.
The doctor who smokes believes the patient should quit. They're just too weak to do it on their own.
Right.
And there's that difference is there. But I think when you say to a young man, so I just was listening to a podcast the guy says, you know what I think we need? We need men to get married before they're ready and to have kids before they can afford it. And he went on to explain why, and it was so beautiful. Now, I don't know if you know this, John, because I've seen you give the advice that you should wait to get married so you can build income. So statistically, and you should look this up.
Okay.
The wealthiest people in the United States are married with kids.
Yeah, I agree.
And
I believe that.
Single people, men and women, single people in their 20s are by far the lower net worth.
Right.
And married people without kids are lower net worth. Married people with kids, way higher net worth. And now you ask, is it causation or correlation? And there is actual causation. So when I build my companies and I have a young man who's single and he says, I'm getting married, I'm like, yes. He's gonna work way harder. He's gonna. I know he is. You know. And then when he says I have a kid coming, I'm like, bring it on. And I watched over and over again these people transform themselves into responsible. So that's why you say this causation or correlation thing. So I actually advise people. I'm like, hey, get married before you're ready. Your vows are going to be for richer or poor. And if you have to be richer before you get married in the first place, how much are you really going to mean that? Okay. And you know, so and build yourself and stuff. So these are just different. Views that we have from things, but they're both subjective. I don't know if you want to comment on that or if you want to share your idea or philosophy.
Yeah, I mean that's a very interesting perspective. You know, like I can't wholly disagree with it, right? I think there's some premises that have to be in place in order for that to make sense. So let me give you kind of my thinking of where I've come from, and you know, and like I said, I could be wrong on this, but from my experience with coaching men, I found that the way that I look at it is that a couple of things. So one is that you know, I'm getting more into relationship coaching for men now, and I'm realizing how little men understand about how to be a man in a relationship and women, and how destructive that is to so many lives. How many divorces? You know, I used to think at one point when you know, I was first getting into the kind of masculinity, the toxic masculine space that's on the internet.
Yeah, right, exactly.
At one point I thought, okay, well, divorces are mostly caused by women. And then it's true that women initiate 80% of divorces. That's true. That's a stat. That's true. However, almost all those divorces are caused by men not understanding how to love a woman properly. Because if they had, a woman is fiercely loyal if she's getting what she needs. Men are not as loyal, even if they're getting what they need. I mean, I think that, and I'm not trying to make an unfair assessment of men, but I think that men underassess women. And so kind of where I'm going with this whole thing is that it's very important for a man to understand how to be a man in a relationship and how to treat women. And he has to develop himself and develop his masculinity and understand a lot of things and develop his emotional intelligence and his emotional mastery in order to be that man, because it is a very difficult thing to do. And so I think, especially today in society where there's no fault divorces and people just give up and we'll just get a divorce like that.
Dude, you are like this conservative Christian commentator in so many different ways without being that. I'm not putting that on you, but it is so funny. And you kind of pointed that out in yourself. You're like, listen, I'm an agnostic. However, I have this like paradoxical thing. And when you started saying no fault divorce, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like this is not something that you hear. You don't even hear it a lot of times from Christians anymore.
Right. Well, and the reason why, just a side note again, why I think that my viewpoint on this and me in particular is so important to this is that I'm hoping, and that's what my wife and I are hoping with our podcast, is that we can reach the population of people that are not religious and that are, you know, what religious people would say, going the way of the world, and from a non-religious viewpoint, steer them in the right direction that would seem like conservative Christian to just about anyone.
So, by the way, I'm going to tell you, I'm interrupting you or interjecting more than I have with any other guest. and the reason that I am is because you're giving such like intense, rich sound bites, and our philosophies are the same in so many regards, but different. I think different in their full extension. Clearly, we talked about it earlier in the show. But here's another reason why. I have said to people, so in my situation, I don't talk much about my situation, but my wife was killed in that Waukesha parade years ago, a couple years ago, if you remember what took place there. So I find myself single as an adult and just not wanting to be single.
Yeah.
So I experienced dating. And I recognize, wow, women are actually more like men used to be now at this age. They're much more aggressive. But I also, I heard the stories from so many women. And I did talk to, quite a few single guys. And they went through the same pattern over and over again. The pattern was, they'd go on a couple of dates. Maybe they'd sleep together the first night or within a couple of weeks. Everything was amazing. They had a great time, super intense. They got to the 3-month mark. They started arguing. Sometimes it was sooner than that. It was between 2 and 4 months.
Yep.
By 4 months, all it was arguing. The only thing they could possibly do to find happiness again was to actually go to bed. And then that just fell apart, and they left heartbroken.
Yep.
And they would repeat that process 2 or 3 or 4 times in a year. And I was like, oh my goodness, if you do that for 10 years, you have slept with so many people and you have so much heartbreak. And then I started reading studies that show that your ability to actually interface with somebody else almost becomes like pornography, where you lose your ability to actually have a strong relationship. And so I thought, even if I didn't have my Catholic perspective on this, and all I had was a humanist perspective, I would tell people, don't do that. Wait till marriage.
Right.
Well, it's a fascinating thing. And you're not fully saying that, but you seem to be saying something similar. Is that right?
Yeah. So I guess, well, okay. So the thing, to go back to the advice that I would give to men as far as marriage. Well, so like I said, a man has to be able to have a relationship. He has to have certain things in himself and be grounded. And I think also that a man, he can develop his financial ability, his assets and his physique and all of these things in his 20s. And the way that society is today, women don't really value a man in their 20s. He doesn't have much selection. He's not a very mature man. A man that's above 30, 35, 40, that might be where a man reaches his sexual market peak, where he's the most valuable to the most amount of women if he's done the right things. Right now, a guy in his 30s can be worse than he was in his 20s, but he has the potential because he can develop himself financially, physically, emotionally, spiritually, to the point where he's a true leader and he has more experience. Then a man can now marry a woman that is in her 20s when he's, let's say, 35 to 25. Let's say there's that age gap. She's going to look up to him. He's going to have more experience. She's going to respect him. It's very important a woman respects a man unconditionally, just like a man unconditionally loves a woman. Those things have to exist, otherwise the relationship will fall apart. And so now so that's why I tell the guys, like, look, you got to learn a lot of things. And, women understand relationships. They understand these things better. And also women are in the following position, not the leadership position. So, if you're a young man in your 20s and you get married, and I was a young man in my 20s who got married, all right, you don't know what you're doing. You're going to hurt this woman. You're going to damage her because she's going to follow your leadership. It causes a lot of issues. And then in the society we live in today, I think before that would have been okay because they could both learn together. But actually, if you go back in time, there usually was a 10-year age gap anyway. Men usually got married to younger women, historically, and especially in biblical times for this very reason, I think. And so, but with the ability to just get a divorce like that, people don't work through it and they don't. I would say I would agree with you more if divorce was less of a thing and less of an option. But But I think that a man, let's say that he waits until he's 35, he's had experience dating women, he understands women better, he's learned who he is as himself as a man, developed himself, read a ton of books, done all this work. Now he's in a position where he has a better selection. And a lot of men today, when they're 20s, they're just going to, the first woman that'll have sex with them, that's who they're going to marry. That's what happens 90% of the time. Whereas a guy in his 30s who's experienced, who has money, who has resources, who knows that women are attracted to him and doesn't seek that validation through sex, he can make a better selection, because now he can say, who do I want as an actual wife? And he can vet women instead of actually, just picking whatever he gets. And so I think that's where my viewpoint on that comes. And I guess like the whole thing of, the pair bonding thing, right? I've heard the stats about that. And the way that I view this is look, when you have sex with a person, it makes you hard. So being hard is a masculine trait. Now, there's obviously degrees to this and levels where this becomes unhealthy to a person. But I do think that a man becoming harder is not necessarily a bad thing. He's becoming more masculine. But a woman becoming hard is a bad thing. And so women having sex with a lot of men, it doesn't mean that they're now trash and they're thrown away, because I think a woman could have a high body count and still have a successful relationship, right? Both myself and my wife have, a high number count, but I think that it makes it harder. And I think that a woman becomes more masculine, and then it takes an even more masculine man to get her into her feminine. And that's the danger of that. And then, like you said, I think there are the people start to throw away relationships. They don't invest. They don't understand, because in order to actually make a relationship successful between a man and a woman, it takes a lot of work. You can't just give up and say we're just arguing and we're fighting. I mean, the amount of work and depth that is required in order to do that is beyond what most people are willing to do today. And I think that is a bad thing. I mean, if I had a magic wand, I would make it the way that you want it. I would say that, hey, you don't have sex until you're married, and you get married for life. Like if I had a magic wand, because that would be the best thing for. And you can see why throughout history, religion has been dominant in enforcing those things, because it is a good for society. But in the reality that we live in, I have a different viewpoint.
Hey there, Giant. Dave Durand here, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our brand new e-newsletter, where you will get the best of the best tips and insights to unlock the giant in you, build an empire, and slay some dragons. Sign up below. Let's go slay some dragons.
Yeah, so this is why I respect you, because you do ultimately see what that greatest good would be. What you pull back on is a practical, humanistic worldview. But I have a challenge for you.
Okay.
You may not accept the challenge. You may not even respect the challenge. But what the heck? Here's the challenge.
Okay.
The ultimate form of being a man is to say, what does perfect look like? And then when everybody else says that can't be done,
right,
to say, well, I'm going to find a way. And if you look at every great man that's ever lived, everybody around him is saying it can't be done. It's not practical. And so they take a default, easier path. But the true man says it can be done. And even if you say it can't be done, I'm going to do it. I'm going to find a way to do it. So here's a couple of points that I want to make on what you said. Okay. And first of all, I hope you can hear the respect that I have for absolutely. Why you are in your position, all that kind of stuff. Very important. But the first thing that I would say is, why are we where we are right now? And see, what you're doing is you're kind of from a practical perspective, kind of accepting this. And I know that it's real.
Right.
And my story includes it, by the way. Okay, I was married for 20 years, and I went through divorce before I got married the second time.
Right.
And I know what that feels like. I know the horror and the pain of it.
Worst thing possible.
It's the worst thing on planet Earth.
Worst thing on planet
Earth. But what I do want to point out, and why I'm such an advocate of marriage and non-divorce, which you seem to be as well too, because you just said, ultimately speaking, yes, that would be a scenario, is this. And I'm taking it's a little to unpack. And feel free to interject while I'm going through this, by all means. I've been doing that plenty, so you go ahead and do it. We are raising children to be children. That's why we have the problem. So what happens is I told my kids, well, I was taught by other people, listen, you're not raising kids, you're raising future adults. So I said this to all of my kids. I said, listen, when you're 18, you're going to go to college or not. Okay. If you decide not to go to college, you're making declaration that you are an adult and you're ready to be on your own, in which case you're moving out. You're going to get a job and you're going to pay for your life.
Yeah.
If you're going to go to college, you can come back here in the summer times and work. You're going to have to save, no matter what, a certain amount for college. And then when you graduate, you're living on your own. If you're going to be a teacher, you can stay till the fall.
Yeah.
If you're going to make commission, you can stay for 3 months to get on commission. Otherwise, you're out. Every single one of them accepted that challenge with enthusiasm, love, and graciousness. No fight. No, how come that's not fair?
Right.
But in preparation. Why? Because I looked at them with respect. Now we call kids in their 20s. So they act like kids in their 20s. Then they need to be in their 30s in order to adapt the things you're talking about to be marketable.
Yeah.
But if they learn to be a man when they're young, they can actually have the very things you're talking about that are attractive to great women at that time.
Yep.
So you're making up for a society that you're like, hey, Dave, that's neat. But the practical thing is they are boys. So I'm trying to get them to be earlier. So what I would say is, let's send a message to people that when you are raising your kids, get them ready to be a man by the time they're 18 so we don't have to go through this 20s experiment.
Yes. I agree with you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm raising my
Yeah.
daughter the same way. And when, no one told me this, but I remember when I turned 18, right? I was like, all right, Dad, I guess it's it. Right? He's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, I'm 18, so I have to leave. And so I left. Like I just assumed, he didn't say it. I just assumed, hey, when you're 18, you're an adult, right? That's it, right? So, but I raised my daughter in such a way that, she's 12 now. She's responsible for her getting up in the morning, for her bedtime, for setting an alarm. One time her alarm didn't go off. She had the consequences. She said, it's not fair. I said, it doesn't matter. That's how life is. Like you didn't have a backup alarm, and maybe it's not worth having a backup alarm. Sometimes you're gonna have to suffer the consequences if you make that choice, but you made that choice and that's your choice and you own that choice. I never yell at her. I'm never angry at her. I give her as much responsibility as possible because I want to raise her in that way so that, like you're saying, I'm treating her more like an adult now as much as I can while she's 12. But the problem is that, and I advocate for this, right? However, we've got a bunch of 25-year-old, 30-year-old kids right now. And I'm trying to help those guys right now. And so that's why I'm like those kids, those guys are boys in their 20s. They don't need to be getting married right now. They need to work on some other stuff first because they're not ready. They're just going to blow up into a divorce. And like we both said, divorce, people who haven't been, I was also through a 20-year marriage and got divorced. It's the worst possible thing that you could ever experience. Well, my mother died, okay, of Parkinson's a year or so ago. And she basically, I watched her die for 7 days, right? Just slowly die as she couldn't eat or drink. It was a horrible experience. It wasn't, getting divorced was 5 times worse.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
People will never understand it if they've been through it.
No. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to prevent that from happening because it's abundantly unnatural.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
But see, this is one of the reasons that it's interesting that you have all of these natural understandings of things that are ordered. I'll just say this: ordered by God. Like literally.
Yeah.
That wouldn't make sense, by the way, if there wasn't a God who designed it to be that way.
Right.
So here's for me, it's interesting because, right. Bad advice. You're 23 years old. You don't have anything together in your life. You have no virtue at all. Oh, go get married. Right. No. That's bad advice. So your desire to help guys man up and be a man, my desire to help guys man up and be a man, accept responsibility, live a life of adventure, by the way, all of these things which make men, okay? The only thing that I would argue with is that I don't believe that, well, actually, I would say that, yes, having sex with women does make a person it makes that man like harder mentally.
Right.
Okay. There's no doubt about it. Right. Which would be considered a masculine trait. But I think that comes at way too great of a cost. And I think ultimately speaking, that man becomes the man because he learns to resist that. And that even if he succumbs to it,
Right.
he comes back and says, no, I need to grow. I need to be stronger. Because at the end of the day, when a marriage works, it's because you give your whole self to the person.
Yeah.
Your whole self.
Yeah.
And when that happens before marriage, you're not giving your whole self. And instead you're taking something that you don't really have a right to. And at some point, and this is a great complication in life too, because you have this intense desire for this thing.
Right.
And it's that classic thing, how can something that feels so good be so wrong, right? But there is that resistance that pulls people back. There's a really interesting study that shows that the reason men run after they have sex is because all of the chemicals which say you are not responsible for this person kick in.
Yeah.
And they say, I don't actually want that.
Right. Yeah.
And they leave.
Yeah.
But it bonds the woman to the man
Yeah.
in an opposite way. And so now you have this conflict. And then, see, this is why I think that men who are doing this a lot before marriage have a lot to overcome. And you have kind of addressed that there is more to overcome. And one of the reasons why is they learn to run from responsibility. So when you do something and then God says, and whether you think it's just biological or divine, God makes a chemical run through your body that says, now you are responsible. And that's why you said these guys will have sex with the first person they want to marry her. When God said, or when that runs through your body and says, now I need to be responsible. And the person learns how to say, no, I'm not going to be responsible. They develop that habit. Just a food for thought. But
Yeah. I mean, basically with the finances that a woman or that a man needs to be able to financially provide. Right.
yeah.
This whole 50-50 thing is absolute ridiculousness. You know,
Man, you must get so much hate mail for saying this.
yeah, it's so ridiculous. It boggles my mind. Look, here, you know what's missing from men today is pride.
Yes.
Right? And I'm not talking about the bad form of pride. I'm talking about
the good pride. Clearly, you mean good pride.
If I go out to dinner, I don't care if it is a woman or if it's a man. I'm putting my credit card there first because I have pride. You know what I mean? I'm going to fight for that check because I have pride as a man. Like the reason why I do harder things is because I'm a man. I'm the man, right? I want my wife to know that I'm the man. I want other people to know I am the man. And so these young men, they lack pride. They want to do 50-50, want to split a check with a woman. How weak does that come across? And so that's, again, like, you know, you talked about the ideals that people aren't necessarily going to accept. I mean, one of the ones that I tell guys all the time, which is very difficult today, is that you should be the sole breadwinner. Your wife should not work. She should stay home, take care of the kids, support you as a man. That's her role, and your role is to make the money. And guys are like, it doesn't work.
I feel like it's Pastor John when you say that.
It's so true, because how can I have the authority in my house and be the man and say that my word is the final word if I'm not paying for all the bills? If she's out working and also doing some of the housework and all that, then it's really hard for me to claim authority. But if I say, look, I'm the captain of this ship, I take care of the ship, I pay for all the things, I make sure everything is taken care of, and I'm the man who's going down with the ship. I will be the one who will sacrifice himself first. And that's why you can follow my leadership and my authority, and you could submit to me because you know that I'm a good captain and I put your needs first. And I'm showing you that by financially taking care of you, by emotionally taking care of you, by making you safe in all ways. What woman would not submit to that man? What woman would not follow?
Yeah, and in the same way that men have been told that their masculinity is toxic, women have been told that docility is wrong. And they have a conflict in that, and that becomes difficult. But I mean, I tell you, I've been around some pretty hardened women who are like, no, I'm driving the career. That's the only thing that's important to me. This is what I do. This is what I do with it. And then privately, they will let down and they say, actually, really what I want is I want a guy to take care of me.
You want to see the destructive element of this, of where this comes out, right? Because very popular book, 50 Shades of Grey, right?
Yes.
Okay, now, women are like, no, I don't want that. That's just a fantasy, right? I don't want a man to dominate me.
Right.
It's not true. They do want that, but here's how it gets expressed. You know, women today, you know what they tell guys in the bedroom or what they want? They want to be choked. They want to be slapped. They want to be called names. They want to be degraded. They like it. It turns them on. Here's why. It's a perversion of the desire to be dominated, because they can't. So in the feminist world that we live in, it's unacceptable for a woman to submit to a man, to say, this man's my husband, he's my authority, I trust him with my life. It's not permissible. It's wrong for a woman to say, I don't need a career. I want to be a wife. I want to stay home and take care of the kids. I want a man to protect me and provide for me and to lead me. So but they crave the dominance. They crave to submit and follow the leadership of a man. They want a strong man. And so because they can't live it in their lives, they live an extreme perversion of it in their sex lives, where they're not just dominated, but degraded in an inhuman way. And it turns them on, and they like that. And so this whole choking and slapping and all this kind of stuff that women are into, it's because of that perversion. It's because of that natural instinct that, as you would say, God put in a woman to have a masculine man that she does submit to. She can't express it in her real life, and so in this fantasy life in the bedroom, that's where she gets those needs met.
That is a sad and tragic thing. And then, of course, men who are addicted to pornography will witness all sorts of things which send them the wrong message and completely objectify something. And you've got this cycle of problems because people don't understand masculine, they don't understand feminine.
Right.
They don't understand what it means to truly protect and truly take care of all these different things. So it is an interesting thing that from our completely different worldviews, while there are differences clearly throughout the show, there are so many similarities about just understanding. Right. Ultimately speaking, that you just have to move in this place of goodness. I think one of the things too, that when people hear what you just said, you should be the man, you should work, you should provide, you should do all these different types of things. They hear a couple of things. They hear that the woman shouldn't have a right to work, which you're clearly not saying. No. If a woman has a desire to do something that is different, you could speak to that yourself.
Yeah, I mean, women are capable. Women can do anything that a man can do.
Yeah.
However, most women, in their hearts, what fulfills them the most is not to be the one out in the front, not to be the leader, but to be the one who is led by a man, to be the nurturer and carry the feminine traits that. So yeah, as a woman single, she, in this world today, she has to go out and support herself, and she has to be in her masculine to a degree in that environment in order to do those things. And it's not wrong for her to want to do those things or to have that ambition, but most women would be best served and have the most amount of happiness and fulfillment in their life if they found a man that was a good man that they could trust 100% and give over all that stuff to, so that they could just be free in their feminine. They would be more happy.
Let me help you out and help me out with the hate mail.
Yeah.
Nobody is saying that you're going to make the woman marry you and not work.
Right.
What you are saying, which is such a good point, is I'm going to let you live your life. If you're a woman who wants that and you're going to do that sort of thing, you do whatever you want. And if you want a man who you want to dominate and you want to be the breadwinner and provider, then we're just not talking to you.
Right.
But what you're saying is you're putting the bet out there, and I am too, that because you know human nature, most women are actually not going to want that.
Right.
The woman is going to want to be led, and the woman is going to want that. And by the way, anybody who's saying, well, I don't want that, fine, we're not talking to you.
Right.
But it is true that is very real, and women do want that, and they feel good in that, and they feel more fulfilled in that. They don't feel reduced, but they actually feel more fulfilled.
Right.
And the confusing part about this is that because they've been told male, See, this is how foreign it is to me. Yeah. I can't even say it.
Yeah.
Toxic masculinity. Because this reference is so much there, and they have this desire to dominate the man, to control the man.
Right.
And then once they do emasculate the man and control the man, they're utterly dissatisfied with him, and then they move on.
Exactly.
And so when you talk about these divorces being filed mostly by women, but often inspired by the man, I don't know really, yes and no, but it's a ping pong match. In other words, I'm not debating what you're saying, but I would suggest quite possibly that the guy came in with the good intentions to do these things, not always.
Right.
She tried dominating him.
Yep.
She reduces him down to nothing, and now he can't actually provide and love the way that he's supposed to love.
Right.
And she bails on him
Right.
to go find somebody more masculine who she can dominate, emasculate, and then leave again. It's like a crazy philosophy.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. However, I squarely put the responsibility on the man, and I'll tell you why. Because the man,
Amen, brother.
He's the leader. He's the leader,
Yeah.
not just the leader, but the leader in the relationship. He's responsible for the health of the relationship. So many men delegate the health of the relationship to the woman, thinking she's the relationship person. It doesn't matter. He's the leader in all things, finances. How many guys delegate the checkbook to their wife and have her pay the bills? No. You are the man. You need to take care of everything and be like the way I tell guys, and I tell guys, look, when a woman asks you for commitment, right, which she should be asking, you don't ask a woman for commitment. She asks you for commitment because you need to have that leverage. You have this talk, it's called the captain of the ship talk, and you tell her, you say, hey, look, there's just something we need to understand. Okay. I'm the captain of the ship. I will always be the captain of the ship. There will be no time where I'm not the captain of this ship. Now, however, I'm a good captain. I will take care of you better than anyone will in your life. I will put you in the highest regard. I will put your needs before my needs. That's why you can trust me as a captain of this ship. I go down with this ship. That means I'm responsible for everything that happens on the ship. If you make a mistake, it's my mistake. It's not your mistake. It's my mistake. I have failed in some way. I take full responsibility for everything. You don't have to be on this ship if you don't want to be on this ship. I understand. I'm not going to be angry at you. You can go your separate way. But I will not live my life where I am not the captain of the ship, because that is my role, and that's how it's going to be. And, and again, if you have that talk at the beginning of the commitment level phase of the relationship, the woman either is going to say, I trust this man enough. This man is a good enough man that I would trust him with my life. I trust his judgment above my own judgment. And I know that putting my life in his hands is better than putting my life in my own hands. And I will follow this guy and I will get on this ship. Or she's going to say, I'm not sure about this. Right. And then she goes, and then it never becomes, but if you start with that, right. And there's some other talks you have to have, some rules that you have to put down, but that's the main one. And again, for a lot of women too, that say, I would never do that. I would never submit to man. The reason why is because, and I'll tell you honestly, it's because you haven't found the right man, a trustworthy man. And it's not your fault, any women that are listening, because 95% of men, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. They're not masculine today. They're not good men. They don't know how to take care of you. So many men are 50-50 men and want you to pull your share, or they ask, what does a woman bring to the table, as if her feminine essence is not enough.
Is not enough, right?
And the other thing that these men don't understand is that, a woman is like a garden or a mirror. You get what you plant. A woman is influenced, and a lot of women don't like me saying this, but it's true that women are more influenced by men, and a woman is a reflection of the man that she's with. And as a man, if you plant the right seeds and you water that garden and you provide the right warmth and sunshine, and if you understand what those things are, which are mostly emotional things, providing that emotional safety for women where she can express her feelings and emotions and feel safe in doing that, and you not getting emotional about it. If you can do those things, the garden the crops that are going to come out of that are going to be beautiful crops. You're going to have a beautiful, if you get nagweed, it's because you planted nagweed, right? The reason why women act some of the ways that they do in relationships is because the man is not stepping up. He's not providing the love. If you provide that love environment that nourishes a woman's soul, it will bring out the feminine essence in her. In fact, there's this thing in in science called magnetic induction. I don't know if you remember this, Dave, but if you take two magnets, right, a north pole and south pole, and you force these two magnets together, right, so the north ends together, right? If you have enough power to push them together, what will happen is that the weaker magnet will flip from a north pole to a south pole. It's magnetic induction. It will actually be induced to flip its magnetic poles. And so if you are a masculine man and you come across in society, it's a lot of masculine women, but if you are a masculine enough man and you can show her that, and I don't mean by being, I'm the man and beating your chest and being dominant. I mean by the true example of masculinity, which is rooted in love. She will flip her pole and she will be feminine in your presence. And I know this for an absolute fact. My wife, who I've been together with for 3 years, and we're still in the honeymoon phase. We will always be, because we figured these things out. Like we are just excited to see. We never yell at each other. We never call each other a bad name. We're just excited to see each other, spend every moment we can together. And the reason why, like I said, I know this is because she was very feminist. She had all these, these ideas and thoughts that are prevalent in society today. And when she met me, she became very feminine. And she never thought that she would stay home and not work, or let a man take care of her. But she loves that, and that's what she does now. And like I said, we have a podcast, and we help other couples to be able to find that. So
that's terrific. So a couple of different thoughts. First of all, and this kind of is to your point, where you can't give what you don't have, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're going to be able to say, listen, I'm the captain of this, of my own ship, you've got to be able to manage the ship.
Yeah.
And that's kind of that point that you're making. You also said something that's very biblical without biblical. And it's one thing that, ironically, you're not a Christian, but you said something that is Orthodox Christianity that even a lot of liberal Christians object to. And it's the biblical verse, women, be subordinate to your husbands.
Ephesians.
And then the second side to it is, now, by the way, just on that doesn't sound like that it's that bad if you're the good guy. Because I've been subordinate in my life, as you probably have. I remember a couple of bosses that I've had before who were great, and I knew they had my interests in mind, and I loved being led by them.
Yeah.
And even though I am an entrepreneur and I build my own companies and I like to be, the lead and all that kind of stuff, I've been in subordinate positions with really good guys and loved it. And in fact, I was like, you know what? There's a burden I don't have right now.
Yep.
And it's that burden that he has. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
I kind of like it. So the only problem with being subordinate to somebody is subordinate to the wrong person. So pick a good husband. That's one thing. The second thing, there's a Christian side of it is that he turns and says to men, after he says women to be subordinate, he says, love
your husband,
your
wives,
like Christ loved the church.
Yeah.
And that means die for her. Like you look at a crucifix, that's how much he loved her.
Yeah.
So when you say you'd go down down with the ship, I mean, it's a little bit easier to be subordinate to a good guy than it is to die for somebody. And by the way, that's a pretty intense death. So that is that sacrificial love that you're talking about, that love that expects nothing in return.
Yeah.
That love that just is going to pour out into somebody in such a huge way. So it's interesting. I had, by the way, no intention about talking religion at all with you. But it's amazing how so many of these things like just kind of parallel. Well, where does that come from? Why? Like the smartest people out there say, well, why do you think that?
Right.
And well, why do you think that when you think that? And ultimately speaking, it leads you to a particular outcome. John, what else would you like to talk about on the show? The stuff that is important to you that matters that people would hear?
I mean, these are the things we're talking about them. I mean, all of these things. I think they're super important. Like I said, a man understanding what it is to be a man today is vitally important. And a lot of people hear what I'm saying now about a man and they say, oh, blue pill simp, right? Like this is, and they don't understand the difference, right? Because, a man, for example, let me give you, if a guy buys a girl flowers, okay, they say, okay, well, he's a simp, he's a nice guy. Okay. And that may be true, because if he's buying her the flowers in order to get her validation, to get her to like him back, to win her approval, to get her acceptance, then then that's true. And she's not going to like him because he's a nice guy. He's doing it for that. Right.
Yeah.
If a guy understands what I'm saying and he's a strong masculine man, he doesn't seek the validation of women. He goes on his own judgment. He does that purely out of love, or just an expression of gratitude, with no strings attached, no expectation of even that she would like the flowers. It's a different thing. And that's the thing that I think so many men are so confused on today. And that's why we have this 50-50 thing that it drives me absolutely insane. That, and like I said, I mean, the same guys that are complaining about feminism want to be 50-50 and ask a woman what she brings to the table. She doesn't bring anything to the table. You as the man tend to the garden, and you cause her to bloom. Like you're the one who's bringing the stuff, right? She's just feminine. She's fertile land for planting, right? Like she's going to be very influenced by you. But I think that the big thing is that men need to understand how to step up and be a man. And again, like I said, especially in a relationship, because, that love, that unconditional sacrificial love, men aren't really doing that. And then their marriages are failing, and then they're wondering why the woman is acting this way. But women will act exactly the exact same. Women will try to control. In fact, if you went back to the Bible, if we went back to Genesis,
yes,
at the garden,
I know exactly where you're going.
The Garden of Eden, when God pronounced the curse of leaving the garden, he did tell the man that he would work all the days of his life, and he did tell the woman, that she would have pain in childbearing, but he also said that you will always be under the heel of the man, and that you will try and control him. That you will rebel against it, and so women will always try and control the man. But the man has to be
so
strong.
John, this is interesting, because when you say these things, you've come back to biblical principles all the time.
Yeah. Because
I don't know.
I
think at the end of the day, whatever. I don't want to. I know where you're going. I think that you. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll just stop there then.
I mean, the thing I would say is that these are fundamental truths. This is why they're important. Is because yes, they're biblical. Yes, I'm familiar with the Bible, but they're fundamental truth. Like even from a non, an agnostic viewpoint of the Bible, you do still have to understand that this is still wisdom that has been passed down for thousands of generations. I mean, not thousands of generations, thousands of years. So, I mean, I think these are some very fundamental truths. But that's the thing that I think so many guys just don't understand. They don't understand the way to be a strong man, masculine, what it is, the value of femininity, how it has to be protected and preserved, how it's not something that women bring to the table. It's not like I do this for you and you do this for me. It's about having the pride of being a man and realizing that you do have that responsibility to protect, to provide, to take
it's
care.
not a transactional relationship. Right. And by the way, what you've kind of demonstrated, if I make an observation which you can edit,
sure,
okay, because it's an observation about you, so you have the right to tell me I'm right or wrong. But it appears from watching your older videos to the way you're speaking now, that the more that you have started to understand masculinity, the more you have had an appreciation for femininity.
Absolutely.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's why women have to stop telling men that they're toxic, because if they want them to understand femininity more and to love it and respect it and protect it, they need men to actually really know what it means to be a man. So, hey, John, it has been fantastic being with you today. I knew that it'd be interesting. You've really done a lot in your own personal transformation. I know you're helping a lot of guys out there too. So grateful for the time, and we'll continue to be in touch. Thanks for watching Durand On Demand. Make sure you go ahead and you hit that like button, you make a comment, you share this with anybody you can, and you can find it all sorts of places too. So feel free to listen to it more than one time and give 5-star reviews on Apple or Spotify as well too. We'll be back with you next week.
Hey there, Giant. Thanks for watching and Durand On Demand. I need your help with something. The world desperately needs more giants. You know it, and I know it. We've been around a lot of people struggling, figuring out how to make things go. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this with as many people as you can. We're going to build this audience, and we're going to help people slay dragons together.